Okay, friends. So this morning I was talking about the progress of the meditation and going beyond just sort of watching the breath or developing concentration. And in the beginning of developing insight. Now, the practice of Buddhist meditation is usually described as samatha vipassana, or tranquility and insight. And tranquility means quieting the mind down so it's not, neurotic, jumping around and neurotic thoughts and always, just reacting and being lost in the past and the future and confusion and so on. So tranquilizing the, what I call it, chitta vrittis, the waves of the mind, so it becomes more calm. But the real essence of the practice, especially of the Buddhist teaching, is that of developing insight, and specifically developing insight into the nature of our mind, and really learning how what our mind is and how it ticks, how it works, and how we've allowed our mind to get all entangled in the world of sensory objects and overly dependent on the stimulation of the external world for our satisfaction. And so basically it means not understanding the mind. So the practice of the Vipassana meditation actually is the word vipassana means seeing reality as it is. And according to the Buddhist teaching, the reality as it is, it refers to what's called the five aggregates. And the five aggregates are all the elements of our body and mind in this world that make up our so-called life. And all those elements of the body and mind, those five aggregates, are by nature impermanent. That means they're made up of other things and they're constantly changing according to their conditioned nature, and beyond our control, really, to beyond our ability to really control. And we might be able to temporarily manage our body and mind to a certain degree through discipline and so on, but ultimately it proves futile, especially the nature about old age, sickness, and death, and not getting what you want and getting what you don't want. This is really what drives, the lives of all people around in circles. People continually driving their life around not getting what they want and getting what they don't want. We already talked about that. And all the worry, confusion, frustration, greed and hatred and so on that ensues when the mind is trapped in this kind of cyclic, repetitive patterns. And that's really the nature of everybody's mind. So anyway, so the Buddha is actually, even though the Buddha is regarded by others as being some great religious teacher and started a religion, but actually the Buddha, first and foremost, was a scientist of the body and mind, or you could say a doctor, but doctors are also kind of like scientists. That means they have a special knowledge of the body and diseases and things like that. And so was the doctor, so was the Buddha. But for the Buddha, he was like a doctor. He diagnosed the problem. He looked around and he saw people were suffering. Their bodies were suffering from all kinds of different diseases and broken bones and getting old and broken teeth and hair falling out and so many types of diseases. And he saw people getting angry and fighting and had hatred and so on, and so many problems. People going insane, and so he's wondering, what's the reason for all that? And so he wanted to find out, because he could see that in his own mind, and by looking around. And so the Buddha took the scientific approach. He'd wandered over when he renounced the world, and he went out for several years looking for teachers to tell him the truth. So he went to different teachers. Tell me the truth. What's the nature of life? What's the nature of suffering? And they would say, I'll go ask him. So he'd go to somebody else and go ask him. Or they would teach him something that really didn't satisfy him. Oh, if you just gaze on this crystal ball, or if you gaze on this candlelight, and stare at it long enough, you'll go into a deep trance and you'll forget about the world and you'll experience happiness, and that's God, or whatever. So many different ideas and philosophies were going about at the time. So the Buddha tried that. Tried all these fantastic meditations. Get his mind, in ecstatic trances, like for several days, just blissed out of the skull, and, mindful of light and infinite consciousness. But then he had to come out of that. And he came out of that and he said, well, I haven't changed. It was a good ride, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. But I haven't changed. So he said, he left those teachers. He said, why should I go and ask other people? They have a mind just like I do. So that's when he went down and he took up the attitude of being a scientist, his own scientist. And he sat down under the Bodhi tree, and then he developed his meditation practice. So I'm just saying that to kind of emphasize the point that the Buddha was really like a scientist. And he took this body to be the laboratory. And he used his mind as a microscope, an electron microscope. And so he sat down and he looked within himself to find the truth, rather than asking other people for the truth. He decided, I'm going to find it on my own insight. So he directed his attention inside, and then developed his system of the four foundations of mindfulness. He systematically said, that started from the outside and went inside to discover the deepest level of truth. So that's what we need to do as meditators. A lot of people, they hear about meditation. Oh, just, practice mindfulness of breathing, or practice this and this, and, get calm and you'll overcome your neuroses, or you'll overcome your anger and things like that. Lower your blood pressure. They treat it as just something, some little technique that they do. But actually, you have to have the attitude of being a scientist and wanting to get down to the, go to the very deepest levels to discover the deepest levels of dukkha, or the suffering. So anyway, that's the attitude that we need to have when we practice meditation, to sit down. Not just, I'm going to go meditate now. No. I'm going to go in the laboratory. So whenever you sit down to meditate, you have to have the attitude that you're going into the laboratory. And how many people have taken a lab, chemistry lab or biology lab in high school or college? So what's a common feature of the laboratory, the science laboratory? They have big, massive, very heavy tables, right? They're usually bolted to the floor so they don't move. And even the microscopes are bolted to the tables, because I also took a class and I went to the lab and I saw that. Microscopes are bolted to the table. They might have said this because somebody won't steal it. No, it's not for that reason. Because if you're trying to look through a microscope and people keep walking into the table and bumping it like that, you're going to have difficulty to clearly see what you're trying to look at under the microscope, right? So in the same way, this body is our laboratory, and our mind is the microscope. It has to have it has to be unmovable. So that's why the asana, actually an asana is called a firm seat. In Sanskrit, the word asana means a firm seat, and specifically for meditation. Nowadays, there's 400 or 500 different asanas and all this stuff. That's not really the asana in the true sense. It can be conditioning the body so that you can actually take a seat, but it referred to Padma asana, or a cross-legged meditation position, was the original asana. Anyway, so that's just sort of your laboratory in the lab table. It has to be firm, not be moving around. And then you look down through the microscope, and just like with a microscope, you have to turn up the power of a microscope, right? To see more details. Is it? So when we sit down and meditate, that is what you should keep in mind. And so, like having the firm seat, or the laboratory is having a straight spine, having a position that you can sit in, and keeping the spine straight, because that's sort of like the lens of the microscope, you might say, actually. Because that's where all the physio and psychic energies and data are moving through the nervous system, to the brain, to the spinal column. And that's really where meditation takes place. So in keeping that idea in mind, then looking down through the microscope. Now, we've already mentioned about the first stage of meditation is learning how to get the mind centered in the present moment, in the body, centered in the breathing body, because that's the whole life is right there. Life begins with the breathing body and it ends with the breathing body, once the breath has left the body. So all of life is really the breathing body, which includes the brain and the consciousness. So we've already talked about centering the mind and the body, and then the next stage is developing understanding what is the body. See, there's two levels of reality in everything. There's the external reality, or external world, where we see a body and we say, oh, that's a physical body, weighs 100 pounds or this and that. But that's just a conventional truth. But the inner body, the body of the cells, what I like to call the sensation body, is the real body. That's where the real life is there. Because, this body is made up of cells, isn't it? Even your skin, you pinch your arm and you get an inch full of fat there. That's probably 1 million cells there, right? But people don't see it that way, normally. But with the mind of a scientist, that's what the Buddha saw. So he sat down and he got his mind centered. Then he started turning up the power of the microscope. And he got beyond just the concepts. He turned up the power of the microscope, and the idea of an arm disappeared, some kind of arm, or body. He started just seeing vibrations, cellular vibrations. So we all know that this body is made up of billions of cells, right? Is it? That's what they tell us, right? Now, we don't know that, but we believe them, right? But anyway, so the Buddha, he felt these vibrations. And so that's what he called, that's just a vibration. He stopped calling it a body. He just said, vibrations are there. Or he was aware, of course, it's a body, but he was experiencing it on a deeper level. And not the conceptual level. So it's just vibrations. And not as my body. He just saw it as vibrations. So this is the next step of the meditation. The development of wisdom is seeing the body and everything in the world as just vibrations. Now, this is a very deep thing, and that's why most people can't understand it, because only somebody who meditates can really, or a scientist, of course, they tell us that, but they just pay lip service to it. They tell us everything is vibrations, right? But they don't live their life according to that way. They're still grasping and clinging into things. So anyway, in meditation, it's a whole other ballgame. If you want to get to the deepest levels of the meditation and the benefits that it brings. So that's what I mentioned this morning. Once you get centered and you're feeling the body, and you're starting to feel the different sensations. And well, I mentioned the 5 aggregates. So this is what's important, is that the 5 aggregates basically is the material world. All the cells and molecules that make up human beings, rocks, trees, animals, planets, volcanoes. It's the material vibrations of the 4 elements: earth, fire, water, and air. But these what they call elements are not like chemistry elements. They're just the way that energy manifests itself. So when we're meditating, we try not to, when we're feeling the body, we normally say, oh, that's a pain in my knee. But that's an idea in your mind. Pain in your knee is an idea in your mind that your mind has created. The idea that it's a knee that belongs to this body is a concept, is a mental process that we've created in the mind. Although in a relative sense, yes, there's a pain in the knee, and this knee belongs to on this body, and this body belongs to me. So that's the evolution of suffering. But anyway, I know it's maybe over your heads, but it's very important to understand. So when we're feeling the body, the Buddha had us go through the body and say, this is the earth vibration, this is the water vibration, the heat vibration, the motion vibration. He didn't say, that's my this, that's my that. He just said, he felt his buttocks pressing the floor, and he says, earth element. He felt saliva in the mouth, he said, water element. He felt the tears coming down, water element. He felt some burning in the stomach, heat element. You felt wind going in and out of the body, or belch, burp, air element. So that this body is just comprised of these four elements. But these elements, all those things are also just molecules, or cells and molecules and atoms, right? And if, you're talking high school chemistry, so everything in the world is just cells, atoms, and molecules. So that's the way we try to see it. And you feel those sensations are basically just the electrons, because every cell and molecule is made up of electrons. Again, this is science. It's not a what? No, it's science. So that's the attitude, that's the sort of scientific attitude the Buddha took. And so he trained his mind that everything is just a vibration, basically. So let's say vibration. You feel something in your toe, basically it's a vibration. It's an energy vibration. Or it's a cellular vibration. And you feel anything on the body, it's just one of those elemental vibrations. And you start to seeing the body as just energy. All those vibrations are basically just energy. That means trillions, quadrillions, septillions of electrons that are revolving around the nucleus. I mean, you believe in science, right? So don't look at me that way. Okay. So, but this is the attitude, what is called seeing reality as it is. So that material aggregate, whenever we see it, when you look up here, you think, oh, I'm looking at Bhante Rahula. No. You're seeing a visual color is striking your eye. That's the only thing that's happening. This color is hitting your eye, and sound is going through your ear. But because of conditioning and so on, ever since you were a baby, you started to identify these things as being particular kind of objects. Now, there's no harm necessarily with that, except for we then get deluded by it, and we form strong attachments and cravings and so on for things that are just mental concepts. So the material aggregate are the vibrations. So when you're meditating, you hear a sound. Normally, if you hear a sound, you say, oh, that's Bhante Rahula talking. That's the furnace going on. That's the gong ringing. Is it? Come on, be honest. Okay, no, that's your mind. That's not the sound. The sound is just the vibration going through. Hearing. Your mind creates a bell out of it, or any number of objects. And the same for seeing. You look around, all you're seeing is colors and shapes, but because of language and conditioning, you can immediately identify it. But all those are concepts. That we take to be real, and then we start to fight over them and kill over them. and so many other things, and worry and fret to death because of these things we're taking to be real. Now, we don't deny that they're not real in a sense, but we don't see their underlying true nature. And so this is where the Buddhist teaching is a lot different than so many other types of philosophies. But that's why it's really a science. So anyway, coming back to the five aggregates. So any of the senses, whatever you smell, taste, touch, we train ourselves to just be aware of hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, and even thinking, even a thought in your mind. Even a thought of anger. Anger in your mind is just a mental vibration. But you're calling it anger. And then you remember somebody that made you angry. And then you get more angry. And it might cause you to do some action. Because you're clinging on to this anger as being yours. So this is a whole different way of how the Buddha trained us to see reality. That these things are not mine, or me, or myself. They're just phenomena that have been created through the course of evolution and passed on through generations and conditionings. And, to where, the people are born and brought up and trained and not to see the reality of it. Anyway, so all these vibrations. Now, all these vibrations are felt then as being something pleasant, painful, or neutral. So this is called the aggregate of feelings. So whatever you feel, then it's felt as being something painful, pleasant, or neutral. And that's accumulated since we were a baby, with that example I gave with the baby, and the grandmother gives it its first sweet. So it starts to identify the face of the grandmother with a pleasant sensation. So when it sees the face again, it gets anticipation, it gets greedy that it wants something. And if the grandmother doesn't give it, then the baby, what? Might get angry. But because of that conditioning. So anyway, these feelings. And then whatever you feel, you perceive. That means you create a mental image of it. That's called a perception. And the perception, basically, like when you look at me and you identify, oh, that's Bhante Rahula. I guess that's what you're doing, right? So that's a perception. I mean, it's the names and labels and how the mind has identified a particular vibration. This color that's coming into your eye in a particular shape, or the sound, or the voice. It's like a magical illusion, magician's trick that's created in the mind out of just basically an empty vibration. Because a young 1-week-old baby who looked at me and never saw me before, the idea of Bhante Rahula is never going to come in his mind, or her mind, probably, right? So it's only because of our conditioning. Now, of course, again, I'm saying there's nothing wrong with that, except we form these very strong attachments and conditionings to want things or not to want them, and fight and struggle to get what we want or don't want, thinking these objects are absolutely real. When actually our mind has just created them. In many instances, created them in a wrong way. Created them in the way that brings suffering. So there's the perception, and then because of the perception, there's the thoughts about it and the reactions to that. Those are called the sankharas. And we react to it. And then there's the consciousness itself, which is the sense of I. I am the one who's hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, and touching, and thinking, deciding this, deciding that. But actually, there's no I doing that. It's only habits doing that. And conditionings. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear this, and that's why they say, oh, Buddhism is pessimistic, blah, 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 blah. But it's actually very realistic. It's not pessimistic, it's realistic. It's optimistic because it gives you the option of changing your mind and reconditioning the mind in a way that has less stress and suffering connected with it. But anyway, so basically, in short, these are those 5 aggregates. But we suffer a lot. They're called the 5 aggregates of clinging, or what are suffering. That's what the Buddha's definition was. He said, birth, disease, sickness, old age, and death are suffering. Getting what you want, getting what you don't want is suffering. And then he said, in short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. And actually, I wrote a whole book about it. So these are the objects of the vipassana meditation. To try to understand their nature and to observe them in their impermanent and no self kind of characteristic. And it's for the purpose of helping to transform our actions, or to purify our thoughts and actions, our karma, that brings us a lot of suffering. Basically, those sankharas, the reactions, are where we are sort of creating our karma. Every time that you act and react to something, you strengthen those habits. So whether you do it the next time. And that's why people are not really, everything is just basically a habit. And the way you think, the way you speak, the way you act, the way you believe, everything has been programmed into you, basically. So coming back to the actual practice of the meditation. So, once you've gotten the mind centered and, turned on the internal video camera, then it's basically, you're just watching the play of the 5 aggregates. Saying, oh, okay, you're feeling the breathing, you say, oh, air element is there. And the earth element. The air is actual air going in and out of the lungs, but the earth element is the rib cage and the clothing against the skin and the other internal organs that are being pressured. That's the earth element. It's just the earth vibration. So we sort of try to stop the mind with the concept creation. And we try to just see everything as just material vibration and sensations and perceptions. But we don't cling to the perceptions. And see how quickly they come and go. So when you're tuning into the flow of impermanence, again we use the breathing body. The breath is impermanent. So that's the training thing. We see how within one breath there's many little sensations. And each of those is a separate arising in vanishing. How many of you today in your meditation, when you were observing your breathing, was anybody able to see how in one in breath there was actually many little individual sensations? Anybody else? Anybody see that? No? Yes?
Yes, actually after long deep breathing, so I experience more sensation in my body, like feel tingling and then like that and normally.
No, I'm talking about the breath itself, the in-breath. Because it's the training in alertness to see. That is the key, actually, in Vipassana, is to see how quickly each moment arises and vanishes. But they're run together because our mind is slow. We don't see that arising and vanishing. Because our mind is slow and it's clinging on to things, it looks just like a solid, flowing experience, rather than seeing it as just moments that arise and pass away. And this is really the key to understanding impermanence. It's sort of like, how many of you have gone to the movies? Especially in the old days, maybe 30, 40 years ago, when they had big reels of film on the projector. So what's a reel of film made up of? Individual frames. If you only see one, doesn't mean very much, right? But because hundreds and thousands of individual frames are run through the machine quite quickly with the light, we don't see the spaces in between. And so it looks like it's a smooth flowing picture. But have you ever seen a movie on slow motion? A reel of film on a slow motion? You can almost see the staccato-like thing like that. That is the way our mind is actually working in terms of perception. And the synapses that are, and all the mind moments, which is basically just energy going through the synapses of the brain and the nervous system, causing this energy. But we don't see that because our mind is dull and it's slow and it's clinging on to the object. So we're not able to see it. And that's how the illusion gets created, that things are something other than what they really are. Just save your question to the end. So anyway, this is the idea about the impermanence. So developing that tuning into the mind moments. Each moment of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking is called a mind moment. That means, look, that arose and vanished. Did it cause some reaction in you? Did you go like this? What's he doing? Those things just arise and vanish instantly. Well, that's what's happening at every moment. Like, even when I am talking, that process of impermanence is going on. Each of those syllables arose and vanished. But because I speak quickly, you didn't see that, and so you think that I'm talking, or you can make sense out of what I'm saying. But if I spoke in just those syllables, and only spoke one or two, you wouldn't know what I was saying. So I know this may sound a little bit confusing to you, but that's the nature of illusion. And the same with sounds, other sounds, like a car going down the street. You fades away and you're saying, oh, somebody's going, what kind of car is that? Is that a Chevy? Or I wonder where they're going. Or it's because we're clinging on to that sound and creating a storyline over it, which may not be that bad, but it could lead to worry and anxiety and unnecessary getting disturbed. Why is that person driving so fast on my street? You're getting angry. Because you're clinging to that narrative instead of just saying, oh, hearing. How can that sound hurt me? Why do I have to get angry because of a sound? Why do I have to have aversion because I see a dead dog, a carcass on the side of the road? I don't like this. I want that clinging. Because we're not seeing the reality of these things, and we're allowing ourselves to get perturbed, disturbed, agitated, irritated, angry, have hatred. Every kind of word in the book is due to clinging on to these concepts and allowing them to disturb us because of our preconceived ideas of what is right or wrong, or what I like and I don't like. And we suffer a lot simply because we don't understand the reality. That's why this is considered to be a very important part of, especially of the Vipassana training. And it's a lot different than a person's idea of just practicing concentration and just wanting to get into a cozy little, mind state of feeling good. And it's a whole other ballgame. But it leads to very profound states. Now, usually about this time in the talk, I give an example from my own life of how I suffered because of taking these things to be real. You want to hear it? Some of you have heard it already. It's called Bhante Rahula's famous avocado story. So when I was young, grew up in California, we lived near an avocado orchard. My mother, being a school teacher, she knew they were healthy. So she used to serve them for dinner with salad normally. But for some reason, I hated avocados, and I don't know why. I thought avocados were evil. And so when my mother told me that we were having avocados for dinner, a chill went up my spine. Oh my God, not again. Anticipating that they were going to cause me, I was going to have to eat them and suffer. So just hearing the word, I suffered because I conceived this avocado as being evil. It's just a mental creation. And projecting into the future that I'm going to suffer from it because I did before. And then when my mother told we were going to have avocados for dinner, I went and found our Mita, our cat. We had a cat in those days. And I used to stay outside a lot. I brought him inside because the cat liked avocados. So I had a plan. So because of that, I brought the cat in the house. And then when sitting at the table, my mother brought the avocados out and I saw them, another chill went up my spine. I searched for the cat. Okay, he's there. And then when I actually brought it to the mouth and, put it on the tongue and tasted it, sometimes I would gag and almost vomit. And so I was suffering from all these different ways, just hearing the sound, seeing it, and even smelling it, tasting it, and thinking about it. I suffered. For what reason? The only way I didn't suffer was rubbing it on my skin. I don't know, I rubbed it on the skin, but I didn't feel anything from that. But 5 out of 6. That's not the end of the story. So anyway, my parents, they loved avocados. My father, my brother, my mother, they were wolfing them down. And I was sitting there sweating, and when they weren't looking, I would give a piece of it to the cat underneath. He would eat it. And then they would finish their dinner. Back in, the 50s and 60s, you had to finish your dinner, and there was only one TV in the house in a special room called the den. And so all the other family members would go be watching Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver and stuff like that. And I would be sitting there staring at the plate. But then I would feed the rest of it to the cat. Then I'd go tell my mom, "Look, Mom, I finished my dinner." So what did I do? What did I do?
You lied.
I told a lie to my own mother. Can you believe that? So that's the point. Clinging to our ideas that things are absolutely things that we don't like or that we do like, causing us to cling them to the extent that we'll lie, cheat, steal, kill, rape, pillage, and plunder. All that is caused in the name of, I want this pleasurable sensation, or I want to get away from a painful sensation. Pure and simple. Nothing else beside that. And it's due to the not understanding the nature of the mind, the reality. So anyway, later on, when I got to India, I went to the yoga ashram, and the yoga teacher was extolling the virtues of avocados, saying they're one of the best fruits and all that. I said, I'm going to test this Dhamma. So I bought a bag of avocados. I'm going to force myself to like them. And I did. Took a couple weeks. I cut them into pieces and mix it with some other food, hold my nose, for a couple of days. But I kept on telling myself, it's all in your mind, it's all illusion, it's all in the mind. Avocados are good. And little by little, I started liking them. Or at least in the beginning, I tolerated them. And then little by little, I started liking them. Now I love avocados. That's why everybody brings avocados. They've heard that story. Okay, so it may be a funny story, but actually it's very real, because everybody has their own avocado story, right? With something else. Some people doesn't like Brussels sprouts or squash, or a number of other things. Or I don't like country and Western music. I don't like rock and roll music. I don't like this. We're full of just likes and dislikes, isn't it? How many of you have suffered over clinging to your likes and dislikes? That's the whole point. Needless, self-induced, self-caused suffering. Of course, it's no fault of our own, because as children we're growing up and we just copy everybody else and we get addicted and caught up in all these things, so without even knowing it, right? But scientists know better. But do they tell us? No. So anyway, so that's one of the main points. So in the meditation, we train ourselves to see how the mind has created these illusions. And therefore, then we can train ourselves by training in mindfulness. we can refrain from indulging in those kind of things, and we can apply sort of the opposite behaviors to gradually break those negative conditions, such as the fear of dark, for example. Almost all different types of phobias, the fear of the dark. Now, it may have come from a past lifetime. You got murdered or attacked in the dark, and that's a memory that went deep into the unconscious mind. And or even as a child, things happen, and you have fear of things that you may not consciously know why. Maybe I choked and died on avocado in a past life or something. I don't know. But so we can train ourselves to restrain ourselves to reacting to, something aversion. And like I did with train myself to, like avocados. So this, kind of understanding that we use, first of all, by tuning into the flow of impermanence, and as the mind stays focused, like the breathing is there, so that's the training wheels, like the child on a bicycle. But then once you've gotten concentrated and the breathing basically is staying in your mind without much effort to actually try to focus on it, it stays, that's the meaning of concentration, the object stays in your mind without trying anymore. And therefore, because it's there, it acts as that tethering post. And so you can start observing other things going on simultaneously, body sensations, pains, sounds, even your own thoughts. But there's, the mind is restrained through the concentration, or it's like a tranquilizer being put into the nervous system. And so even though pains arise, the mind isn't stung so sharply by them. And it can look at it, okay, there's a pain there, it's not so bad. You can relax around it and endure it for a long period of time. Or if the sound, irritating sound is coming there, and you can observe yourself getting irritated by it, it's just hearing, it's no big deal. I have a PhD, why should I let a sound bother me? So you can talk yourself through it that way and see the silliness of how we've allowed our mind to get so tightly attached to insignificant things. Somebody insults you. Why do you get angry? It's just words. It's just hearing. Even this body, who am I really? The idea of me is just an illusion in the mind. So you don't have to get angry at somebody because they insult you or do something else. And, cause it to, think about it for hours and hours and so on. But, we do that because of the habit. So armed with this knowledge of impermanence and conditioning, we can then, when anything happens in the life, we can reflect on it. And we can, with the mindfulness, we can create a distance between the object or ourself and the object. And that's why the importance, the wonderfulness of developing the ability to just feel the outline of the body. And you'll be able to do that if you work and being able to maintain that in meditation. You take that into the standing position and into the walking position. And then once it gets a habit in the mind, when anything happens, you immediately can come to that, and that the incoming data will get dimmed. It won't go deep into you because of that buffer zone of awareness and wisdom. It acts as kind of a block to the negative vibrations that are trying to come into us through our eye, ears, nose, tongue, or even our mind, and from others. And that way, by not reacting, like with greed, desire, and anger, jealousy, envy, fear, the whole gamut of various emotions, by not reacting in that way, they gradually die on the vine. Because our emotions and so on and reactions only stay strong because we keep on repeating them. And so by not repeating them, they gradually lose that power. And like I did with the avocados, for example. And therefore you'll stop accumulating so much stress and being bugged and irritated by so many things that you're experiencing throughout the day when things happen. It's just hearing, seeing, smelling. And that stops the mind from going after it. But if you allow the perceptions to form in the mind, and that's so and so, and then the memory of that so and so comes into the mind that they stole $10 from you before. I want that back. All this, the mind gets flooded with all kind of thoughts and memories. It causes a lot of grief. When 99% of those things are no big deal. Really. If you really think of all the things that happened to you, and if you're really honest, maybe 5 or 10% maybe were a little bit important perhaps for something, but a large majority are really insignificant. Or, no big deal. I'll save it till the end. Okay. Better not go any further.
You can ask Zoom people have any questions.
So anyway, I think that'll be enough for now. And if you have questions here, we're going to see if anybody on the Zoom has a question. You can also write the question down for this evening.
They can raise their hand.
Is anybody out there over Zoom? Do you have any questions about anything? How many people are there? A few.
Yeah, 7 people. 7 people. Bikram had the question that how knowing and feeling the vibration can make us suffer less, but I think you already answered in last 10 minutes with avocado story.
Well, yeah, it's not just feeling the vibrations, it's knowing the emptiness of the concepts, the ultimate emptiness of the concepts about them. A lot of people can say, oh, feeling, but then get attached and react to it anyway. So it's the wisdom that actually helps you to restrain the mind from reacting. Because these habits are very, very strong. They're ingrained into the cellular level of our nervous system. We could even say the molecular level or even atomic level. Any other questions? Okay, maybe if one of you back there had a question. Did you have a question? See? Forget about it. Never mind. That's why I should always just wait. You forget about it. It wasn't that important. Or maybe it was answered already.
It's a practical question, and I so when we practicing all the sounds or impressions coming into, how do we transition from just receiving all these different impressions to actually experiencing them as vibration? Like, I know we can say, okay, it's just sound, it's just vibration, but not just saying it conceptually, but experiencing it as such, as you said, like wisdom. How do you transition in terms of practice?
By deeper levels of concentration, and also by speeding up the rate of perception. The reason why we linger on an object is because we're continuing to feel it, because we think it's something real and thinking about it. So when you know it's just a hearing or vibration, and then you stop conceiving it, and then you unpurposely feel something else. So there's always thousands of things coming through our senses at any one time. Now, most of them we're not aware of because our mind is very gross, but when you're concentrated, especially in the body, there's hundreds and thousands of sensations always going on right there in the body all the time because there's billions of cells and they're all vibrating. When the mind's concentrated, it's like that microscope. You can feel, subtle little sensation in your tip of your toe, in your ear a little bit, everywhere else. And so there's so many things you can notice. There's no time to cling on to one. The reason why we cling is because we hear 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 15 or 20 repetitions of that thing, like the sound. We hear the sound. So we want to hear that. No. If you hear something on this side, next time hear something on that side. Hear something above. Hear something behind you. If you feel something here that's grabbing your mind, feel something over here. Keep it moving. Don't allow your mind to get stuck on any particular one, because then it can't bring in the past or future about the object, because the past or future, the memory of the object only comes in when we're holding on to it and continuing to identify with it. But when you're not allowing the mind to do that, then that circuit gets cut. And that is how we experience the emptiness of it.
So the sense of I actually inhibits the perception, the quickness of it. The moment there is I, you start labeling.
Yes. Well, the sense of I exists in relationship to the amount of attention that we're giving to the object. But because the I is there, it's wanting to hold on to that object. And then when we're holding on to the object, that reinforces the sense of I don't like it, or I like it. And it keeps on sending a feedback loop around it. It gets strong clinging. And the I. So that's got to be broken. And it can only be broken through that, letting go of it, by either through wisdom or by paying attention to something else. But not giving it time to trigger off your memories and other things like that. Okay, so any other questions? I think write them down for tonight, because we want to continue and have our afternoon meditation period. Is there any other question? Okay. So for those of you tuning in over Zoom, we're going to finish this Dhamma talk now, and if you have time, try to do a period of meditation as this information is maybe fresh in your mind. Try to do a period of meditation so you can, kind of remember some of the things you might have heard. Just hearing here. That's not dog barking. It's feeling. It's not a body. It's just feeling. This earth element, air element. And so you deliberately have to develop that's what's called a reflective wisdom. And it involves some kind of element of discursive thinking to help to get the mind onto the right track. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a deep, slow breath. Try to bring your mind back a little bit and just touch base with. Take a deep, slow breath. Hold the air in the lungs several seconds.